As you can see by the title of this video, I indeed did think of another top 10 that I'd like to cover regarding Scarlet and Violet. The topic of cut Pokemon is always a bit of a sore one with people, whether it be because they believe no Pokemon should be left behind, or because their favorite Pokemon didn't make it into the newest release. I mean, for instance, just take a look at Minior. It hasn't been available outside of Alola yet, and I'm sure it's someone's favorite Pokemon, and they'll probably have to wait until the 10th generation to finally use one again. The point is, when a Pokemon gets left behind, it can really leave a lasting effect on players, from both the casual and competitive perspective. Scarlet and Violet was no stranger to cutting some big-time Pokemon, so I guess let's waste no more time and hop into this. Before we begin though, we have another segment of should you use said Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. Today, we have Glimmora. Also on Mystic Reads, I read fanfics, and especially today, we have another new part to Road to be a Pokemon Master Kanto Edition, where Ash and Serena go through Kanto together from the very beginning. I will leave both these channels in the description below and the iCard above. We'll start our list with the starter Pokemon that were left out. What we know is this much. The starters from Paldea, Galar, Heatsuite, and Kalos seem to be the only ones we know for sure are going to be appearing in Scarlet and Violet, even if they're not all here just yet. We of course have seen Charizard as well, but it looks like that's going to be the only lineup of starters we get in these games via Pokemon Home, unless there are some big changes with potential DLC. So that leaves us without strong competitive Pokemon like Venusaur, Blaziken, and Infernape, but also continues to give the starters from Unova no way of being used. While Oshawott got the chance to go 3D and get some respect in Legends Arceus, there has been no representation at all for Tepig and Snivy. I think we can all assume that part of this is probably due to seeing 5th gen remakes in the next few years. But still, it's just a shame that all starter Pokemon can't make a game by default. I definitely hope in future generations they rethink the idea of leaving out certain starter Pokemon, or at least don't just do something like putting in Charizard and then forgetting Blastoise and Venusaur. The next Pokemon up is one I'm actually a huge fan of and was pretty disappointed to see get left out, Nidoking. You guys know that over the years on my channel, I've had little bad to ever say about Nidoking, and I suppose Nidoqueen too, as they're both relatively strong Pokemon with great coverage in their move pools and were always super easy to get. I obviously can appreciate having to step out of my comfort zone when playing these games and making teams. And I'm sure you guys are counting the days until Gardevoir is left out of the game, so I can't put it on the best team by the way. Nidoking is of course well known for its sheer force ability, playing well with the coverage in its pool, with moves like Earth Power, Flamethrower, Ice Beam, and more all boosted in strength by the ability. That basically means stopping a Life Orb on Nidoking will let it serve as a phenomenal coverage machine on many competitive teams. It's a real shame that it didn't make it in the Scarlet and Violet, but I bet it's definitely a prime candidate for a later edition and a DLC of some sort. Let's move on to another bit of first generation power that we didn't end up seeing back, Alakazam. It was definitely weird to get Gengar and no Alakazam, since they're so well associated together, but we also didn't see Machamp or Golem either. Though I don't think losing those two carries quite the weight that losing Alakazam does. Now to be fair, much like with Nidoking, we did not see Alakazam right away in Sword and Shield, and instead it was brought in during the DLC. So I think we can also say this psychic powerhouse is a top candidate for a return should we get some extra content. Now, I do advocate for using Gardevoirs on best team over Alakazam, usually due to the fact that Gardy has access to Thunderbolt, and even in Arceus, it actually got a Fire-type move to use too. But just because Gardy might be better from the aspect of a coverage Pokemon, that doesn't mean Alakazam shouldn't be available to use. It's a popular, really strong Pokemon, and considering the fact that Pokemon like Talonflame, Gengar, and Gardevoir can always make appearances every generation right off the bat, why can't Alakazam? So speaking of a really strong Pokemon being left out, From a competitive standpoint, it's a shame there's no Adaslash in Paldea. It's kinda crazy to think too, because it feels like this would be a great region for a Sword and Shield to be floating about. Imagine just seeing Honedge all laid up in one of those ruinous areas you find Tinkatink and Gimmighoul at. I will say though that I kind of understand why they chose to not have it around. This region is pumped with Ghost-type Pokemon. Many top-tier options with new Pokemon introduced that would probably turn off some from using Adaslash to begin with. However, at the end of the day, this thing is a great UU Pokemon that was obviously seen as one of the most versatile Pokemon in competitive thanks to its ability between massive defenses and offenses. You add in its great moves, including Stab Priority and its own version of Protect, and yeah, it's a real shame that Adaslash is out of here now. We'll close out the first half of the list with Whimsicott, which is probably the best competitive Pokemon so far. You can never understate what great support will offer a team, and not having Whimsicott definitely hurts a few teams out there. It's not a great Pokemon on its own, but in doubles it offers Tailwind, Helping Hand, and Taunt, all while boasting the great Prankster ability and a fantastic speed stat. You want to have that sort of Pokemon on your team. Its fairy grass typing is great for defenses too, giving it a great bunch of resistances and of course that dragon immunity. However, as an attacker, go nuts. Moonblast, Energy Ball, Hurricane, all of those are solid moves with the speed this thing has. And if it's holding a choice specs, even better. Whimsicott is super versatile, and it's a shame we don't have access to it as of now. Next up, we've got Metagross. And I gotta ask, why did Game Freak do this dude so dirty? It should have been in these games, as every single other pseudo-legendary got the chance to be available. Well, aside from Komodo, but Metagross isn't a dragon, so it takes precedence. I definitely understand the fact that it isn't a great competitive Pokemon to many people, so I'm not really thinking about it from that perspective. I just wish it had been in the games to use. There's plenty of other Pokemon with high evolution levels, so that's not really an excuse. I don't really get why it was left out. It's not like there's many other good Steel Psychic Pokemon out there. Who's gonna choose Bronzong over Metagross? I don't know, but I just felt it was a good Pokemon to open the top 5, because it makes no sense why they just leave this Pokemon out in the cold. Why does Game Freak love Dragon types so much? It's honestly getting kind of old. So here in the 4th spot is all the fossil Pokemon. As a matter of fact, the 9th generation marked the first where there were no fossils at all. They didn't introduce any or put the old ones in the Pokedex. As we saw in Sword and Shield, fossil Pokemon can be found out in the wild. So we can't say it's due to the geography of Paldea not having access to certain fossils. It really doesn't have to. I guess Game Freak sat back and pretty much said, hey, we have 25 different fossil Pokemon, that's an easy group to just cut out. Which I'm definitely not happy about. I know some people are really happy to not be seeing the Galar fossils at this point, since some of them were pretty good, but I hate not seeing Aerodactyl, Kabutops, Tyrantrum, and more, especially Cradily, because it's my favorite. This is one of those times where I'm just like, come on, Game Freak, you didn't have to do this, especially in a game with such emphasis on time travel stuff. So these next few Pokemon are ones I'm definitely upset weren't in the games, because I like them a lot, but they're also really useful Pokemon too. I'll start with Roserade, which is easily one of my favorite grass types to use. There are very few Pokemon that fill its role quite as well on a team. Access to Energy Ball, Sludge Bomb, and Dazzling Gleam all on one base 125 special attacking beast? That's just awesome. And as you guys know, I do enjoy throwing it on best teams and whatnot. Obviously, this game gave us some new cool poison types and also a handful of interesting grass options. But if Roserade were in this game, it'd definitely probably be the best of its typings. You can call me obvious, but I just miss Roserade, dude. Speaking of Pokemon on best teams, you guys love coming at me for putting Snorlax on them. So I'm sure you best team fans were happy to see Game Freak actually left Snorlax out of Paldea. I was sort of shocked that it was, since as we know, Snorlax is for sure one of the most popular Pokemon out there. And quite frankly, seeing Game Freak at all leave certain first generation Pokemon out of their games is always weird. Naturally though, they left the damn Blissey line in the games, so I can't even argue that there is no good special wall for normal types. But I will say Snorlax is definitely capable of being a decent attacker while serving as a wall, so it's definitely missing out from that perspective. I don't know, I just hate not getting to have at least the option of using Snorlax. But as I've said with a few Pokemon on this list already, I can definitely believe it's on a short list of Pokemon to bring back with the DLC. So finally, we reach the top spot of the list, and it's going to Skarmory. This is a really weird one not to have, but I guess Game Freak figured they had Corviknight, so why do Skarmory too? Obviously, Skarmory is a top tier support Pokemon, setting up hazards and running Defog and Roost while having the ability Sturdy. It can stall out with Toxic, run a move like Counter, and with the base 140 defense, you know that's definitely a viable option. So many of the Pokemon in Paldea could have definitely been handled by Skarmory's typing and defense, so maybe that's why it's not here. I'd argue there's a good chance it'd be used even more than it was in Galar. Hopefully we see it return at some point, because I know for sure I want it back. I love Skarmory. Well, that's pretty much it. Those are my top 10 Pokemon that were cut from Scarlet and Violet. Well, there were technically more Pokemon than 10 on the list, but you get it. I want to hear what you think though. What Pokemon do you miss that were not included in the Paldea region? There are no wrong answers here, so let me know your top 10 in the comments. With that, I'll see you guys next time. We're finally here in 2023, and I'm super excited for what this year has to offer us. There's potential DLC for Scarlet and Violet on the horizon, and who knows just what else Game Freak may have up their sleeves. It's going to be really exciting times coming up for a Pokemon fan. If you're interested in more Mystic content, check out my TikTok and Mystic Umbreon Shorts YouTube channel. I've got a really fun series starting up there very soon, and of course, have a weekly edition of my Should You Use series focusing on Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. Also, if you're into fanfictions and what ifs, check out Mystic Reads. I offer a ton of creative spoken word content on there, so come join me. Thanks again for joining me today, and I'll see you all next time.